Penny Pratt is the member for Frome, and she's the shadow minister in a whole bunch of portfolios. Penny, welcome back on Flow.
Good morning, Ricky, and happy Easter to you and your listeners.
Yes, we did have a happy Easter. In fact, I drove through your electorate. We'll talk about that in a moment. And just to be clear for listeners' benefit, there is a matter that was raised in the Adelaide media involving Penny, but because that's involving lawyers, we won't be talking about that. We'll be talking about what's been happening in Frome, including recent festivals that have happened and indeed a positive result on the roads over Easter as well in Frome.
Oh, Ricky, I'd always much prefer to be talking about fantastic people that live in Frome, the communities that they represent, the bumper harvest that we are still reflecting on, and all the events that are ahead of us over the next few weeks. Thanks for a chance to talk to your listeners this morning.
Yeah, look, I did drive past quite a lot of grain sitting there at Bowman's on my way through, coming back from the York Peninsula. There was a bit of road work there and improvements. It's always an ongoing challenge improving roads, but I gather there's always some work you're advocating from in that front.
Well, there is, and to start with the harvest, of course, anyone involved in farming knows full well that we have recorded a record bumper harvest, 12.8 million tonnes in this past season, which equates to $4.6 billion at the farm gate. We want to see that return back into the pockets of farmers. We know they invest in their property, their seeds, their machinery, and that flows back into our community towns. What is a sad contrast in a town like Clare is that we're unfortunately seeing some Main Street businesses close well after we thought the COVID impact was over, but those financial pressures are there. So a bumper harvest is essential because we want to see that profit flow back into our country towns, but there's always more work to do. And the revenue that the government takes, we always want to see invested back into country roads that supports the freight route and that circular economy. Ricky, I understand you've been driving through the Mid-North recently. What have you seen in your travels?
Well, one thing I did notice, and this is a very small matter in some respects, but so often the signage when it comes to roadworks is not secured sufficiently against the winds you get there, and it's blown over and you don't actually know what speed you're meant to be doing through the roadworks. Is there something we could do to help councils have signage that stays up in the strong winds?
Look, that's a great point to make, and I think we've all driven past those signs that have blown over. There's a lot of pressure on councils in recent months with road repairs. Of course, they contract the repairs out, but always happy to advocate back to councils to look for those ideas. I think that are common sense, practical solutions that we all think of as we're driving around, but also don't cost much money and communicate to drivers essential safety messages. So happy to pass that one on to my local council.
One of those I came across, the sign had blown over just before. There was actually no bitumen in one section of the road near Hamley Bridge, I think it was. But anyway, look, that's my headaches driving through the electorate. But also more sealed roads would be great as well. But enough about what I want. Talking about those Clare businesses, there's been some optimism just after Easter about the wine market into China reopening. Certainly some positive news on the barley front. That might come a little too late for some of those businesses, but maybe the wine industry could take off again in the Clare region.
Well, I think it's barley growers first. So back to our farmers, the opportunity with a recent federal government announcement that there is a likely pathway back to lifting the tariffs on barley, that China has declared it will conduct a 4-month review on these tariffs. We know that it's reported malt masters in China prefer our product over European growers. So there is, credit to the federal government for their advocacy. Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong and our sometimes local Trade Minister Don Farrell, who are advocating on behalf of our growers. In this instance, barley. Barley is not just a product used by malt masters. We know that Cooper's Brewery, a fantastic and significant South Australian business, rely heavily on barley growers. And any lifting of a tariff will see an investment or an increased revenue back in South Australia. If the tariff can lift on barley, the pathway for winemakers, I think, is also optimistic. They are currently still suffering with a 200% tariff on top of what they're used to. So 3 years in, it's been hurting our local communities, but it looks like there might be light at the end of the tunnel.
There's excellent points, and you also mentioned there Don Farrell, who I believe is a vigneron of some sort. Maybe it's a small patch he's got, lives in the Clare Valley, doesn't he, Don? I spoke with him recently about his efforts to get China back on board.
Yes, Ricky lives around the Clare Valley. It's not my place to declare his address, but a frequent member of our community committed to the Clare Valley. Yes, a vigneron, understands the pressures that are facing our wine and winemakers and grape growers, and that's what advocacy looks like at the local level. And I'm happy to say I play a part in that as well at the state level.
Now, on that state level, just lastly, I'll get you to list all your shadow portfolios. It's quite a list, but what's an area you've been particularly active in that area recently?
Well, as I rattle them off, I think it'll speak for itself, Ricky, that I if I'm not focused on Frome, and that's pretty much 99% of the time, then I'm thinking about health and how it ties back to the Mid-North and the rest of the state. My portfolios are regional health services. I'm the Shadow Minister for Ageing. I'm the Shadow Minister for Preventative Health and Wellbeing. And I'm proud to say that I also have the suicide prevention and mental health portfolios. Now, all of these issues hit home when we talk about health services in regional SA. What does it mean to be ageing well? What does it mean to be burdened by anxiety and depression and worries, and where are those services? What does it mean to be having a baby and wanting access to obstetricians and gynecologists? And of course, we're all generally affected by delays to see our fabulous country GPs. So that takes up a lot of my time. I get to travel all of the Mid-North as well as regional South Australia, meeting with doctors and allied health professionals. And I would put out a call today, Ricky, to your listeners to consider the wonderful work that is being a volunteer paramedic. So ambulance service volunteers are in need. I have a healthy respect for the fact that in the city that is a paid profession, but without our emergency responders in the country, whether that's SES, CFS or our AMBOs, we're always reliant on volunteers. So if anyone's interested, they can Google SAS volunteer at sa.gov.au and get more information.
Yeah, that's an excellent point as we wrap up. Penny Pratt, member for Frome, on the Regional Health Services front, is we've been talking a lot with your federal colleagues like Anne Ruston, the Shadow Health Minister, about getting doctors into the country and the structure of Medicare. But if people can volunteer across our emergency services, that will certainly help alleviate labour shortages. Definitely.
And Ricky, just on a different note, I'd love to wish all the school students and their families a fantastic school holidays as that comes upon us next week. There's certainly lots of activities on around the Mid-North, and there are ways to find that out through council websites or social media.
Thanks again, Penny Pratt, member for Frome, for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ricky.